Schrader, and we're reading about him a lot lately. He's sharing about his swanky new apartment in New York. He's sharing on Facebook, even though you're supposedly banned.
I'm the poster boy for assisted living.
This is true. And now he's in the New Yorker with quite a long profile, extraordinary profile. So are you banned on Facebook, or are you just posting anyway?
What?
Magnolia, did they tell you to stop sometimes?
They told me to stop. But interesting to know the reason. I've been in Saudi Arabia and Jeddah, and Saudi Arabia has changed so much in the last 6 years in terms of movies. Movies 6 years ago, they weren't there. Now there's big AMC complexes, the Red Sea Film Festival, the Cinematheque, you know, everything. And I posted about that, and apparently there was a Magnolia meeting, and they said, you know, he shouldn't be saying anything good about Saudi Arabia.
You can say whatever you So Master Gardener is the one that's coming up on May the 19th. And but how are you able to keep getting, you know, this was a trilogy, the first Reformed, Card Counter, and is it a real trilogy?
Well, it's like Bergman's trilogies. They're post facto trilogies. You know, Bergman did these series of films, and they're now called a trilogy, but they weren't a trilogy when he did them. But it just fell into a three, and critics like trilogies and don't like tetralogies much. So if you get 3 films in a row, it's just bingo. And there aren't many American directors who can sort of claim that hat trick, even if it's not true. And so it became a very convenient merchandising gimmick. And when I had the idea for Gardner, I was telling somebody about it, just you know, bouncing the idea off them, and they said to me, well, that's a trilogy, that's the third order trilogy. I said, no, it's not. And I went home and I thought, you know, it is. And so I accepted that fact and did it anyway.
So talk about how the filmmaker Robert Bresson changed your life.
I was living here in Los Angeles. I was a film critic for the LA Free Press, which is a very large distribution alt publication. A lot of sex ads, a lot of anti-pink editorials. And they had a preview at the Lemley on Los Feliz. The film Pickpocket, which was coming out in Los Angeles 10 years after its first release. And it's only 75 minutes long. And in this 75 minutes, I came to realize 2 things, both of which changed my life and became the fulcrum of my life, which was, one, I had a kind of a sacred past. I'd been in theological school and religious upbringing. And now I had a profane present. I was at UCLA grad school. And I didn't think they were connected at all. And then I saw this movie and I said, they are connected. But they're not connected by content, they're connected by style. And that throughout the history of art, artists, musicians, painters, garden designers have found a way to convey the transcendental, and they convey it through style, they don't convey it through content. And it was that insight that led to a book 2 years later called Transcendental Style in Film. That was one insight I had in the 75 minutes. The other was that I was living at that time in the Fairfax district with a group of LA with UCLA film students. They were all making a film on for Roger Corman, a biker club. And you know, they were all full of themselves, and I looked down on them. Real arrogance of the film critic era. I was protege of Paulie Kael's. I was of that era of film criticism where we said, we'll tell you when you make a good film. So I had no respect for them. I wanted to be a film critic. I wanted to be a scholar, and I didn't think there was any place for me in this Hollywood business. And I went there and I saw this movie. There's a guy sits in his room and he writes in a journal. Then he goes out and steals some stuff, writes some more. Police come and talk to him, writes some more. Visits his neighbor, writes some more. And I walked out of that screening and I said, you know, I could write a film like that. And 3 years later, that was Taxi Driver.
Have you been writing that same film for the rest of your career?
No, not all of it. Fortunately, I've had respites. I just had dinner with Brett Easton Ellis. We dived into a film with Brett, which I really loved the opportunity to dive into Brett's end of the pool. I don't know whether it's shallow or deep. And then I did a film that Harold Pinter wrote. I really enjoyed being part of Pinter's world. So I haven't been exclusively mining this territory.
But First Reformed really feels like you came back to some kind of classic version of yourself.
Well, that was because of two things. Primarily, it was because of digital. Because when I started making films, they 42 days, 44 days, 45 days. That was the shooting schedule. Today, that would be a $10 million, $11 million film. That's what it took. And it was always just such a struggle to try to make independent cinema in America without subsidies at that budget level. And I did what I could, and some were better than others. And I started writing on spec. I'm probably the first person I know starting writing on spec, and the last person I know is going to be ending writing on spec. And but then the digital came in, and the shooting schedules dropped. Now I'm making films in 20 days, 21 days. These last 3 films are all in that area. The shooting scripts are now 78 to 82 pages. They used to be 115. Everything is faster. I'm putting more visual chips, more visual information in the chips today at 20 days than I put film in the camera when we used to have film in camera. And so I used to lie, because we were all sort of the spawn of Francis Coppola, the film generation. And one of the things that Francis taught me was just believe it. If you believe you're doing a film long enough, someone will believe you too. And just lie. And so I did what Francis told me. I'd go into a meeting and I would say, look, I know the only thing you care about is making money. The only thing I care about is making money. This is our lucky day. Let's make some money together. And strangely enough, some people would actually believe you. But
This is the secret behind your ability to continue to make the movies that no one else seems to be able to make, serious dramas in Hollywood?
yeah, I'm sorry. But
Go ahead.
no, I'm just I got lost there. But anyway, but now when I tell people that, I'm not lying, because at these budgets, 4 to 5 million, 20 days, actors who work at scale, I can make my investors whole. And that's all I feel as a good Christian steward. I'm not required to make them rich. But I am required to try to get their money back. And I do. And these films are making them whole. And the new film, which I started in July, will all be equity financed.
Good for you. So this is the Richard Gere, Russell Banks?
Yeah. I do another novel by my friend Russell Banks, who died in January, a film about dying. It'll sort of be my Ivan Ilyich, and I'm going to go back and do it with Gere again.
Looking forward.
It's called Old Canada. Canada being the metaphor for death.
So, I have a question for you. There's a writer's guild strike going. Are you allowed to talk about your movies right now?
I got an email saying no. But here, as I showed you earlier, stick out your arm. This is what happens if I speak about the film. That's how toothless, this is what it is.
You've been through a number of writer strikes now. How many, 5?
I believe that about it.
So, my feeling right now is that this one could go on for quite a while.
I don't think so.
Ooh, tell me why.
Well, the writers like to strike. It's a bump for them. They were formerly unemployed, now they're on strike. The directors hate the strike because the guild is primarily assistant directors, and they all lose their jobs when they go on strike. Writers don't lose their jobs. Believe me, none of the keyboards in Hollywood have stopped working at night. They're all working right as we speak right now. Boom, 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 boom. This is what a strike looks like. Excuse me, dear, could you get me some more coffee? I'm on strike. So everybody's still writing. And then when the strike is over, there'll be this surf in of spec scripts. But for the first time, the stars are aligning in that there could be a director's guild in a month, and there could be a SAG guild strike
SAG after.
a few weeks after. And as much as the directors don't like the strike, it's the same issue. They're getting burned by the streamers in the same way. So it's the directors line up behind the writers. And then if SAG lines up behind, then the strike will be over, boom, right there. The streamers will buckle, they don't have a choice. So, theoretically the strike could go on 8 months, 7 months, but if the directors and actors join in, boom, it's over.
And do you think that AI is going to be a big issue, and how do you think it will be resolved? The producers, aren't they putting AI scripts together right now?
Yeah, and AI is not going to be resolved. It is going to be very much a part of our future. And the truth is that a lot of the television scripts, movies you now see, are written in kind of by AI already.
That formula.
Yeah, different formula, And, if someone were to ask me, say, do an episode of CSI, is that the big crime one? And I said, okay. I watched a dozen CSIs, catch the template. It's all the same characters, all the same dialogue, all the same tape, all the plot acquisitions, everything in the same template. I could knock that off. Easy enough. Well, that's the same thing AI is going to do. You know, AI is not going to make a better or more creative. No, they're probably going to make a better episode of CSI simply because it's faster and it's cheaper and it doesn't waste its time with any pretension. So when it comes down to the AI discussion, I've been talking on Facebook with this people, and I said, you know, can AI write a Bob Dylan song? And the answer is yes. There are enough Bob Dylan songs that can go out and knock one off. Maybe not as good, maybe even as good or better. But here's the real question. Could AI write a Bob Dylan song if Bob Dylan had never written a song? Could AI invent Bob Dylan? Now you're talking about that hypothetical situation where you have an infinite number of monkeys typing an infinite number of keyboards, all having assumed and ingested an infinite knowledge of American pop music history. And sooner or later, will one of them write Masters of War? And if they do, will they know it? That's one of the interesting things about AI today.
All right, let's open it up for some questions. Right here, in the white shirt.
Thank you for coming out, Mr. Schrader. I love the film. Your films tend to not be pure transcendental style, but they carry certain elements or techniques of transcendental style. Would you say that First Reformed has the most elements?
Yeah, it's clearly the most. He was asking me about this style I kind of tried to define in a book. And I really did it in this one. I really did try to set out to do that style, to use those techniques, static camera, no overs, planimetric depth,
Frontality.
you know, the flat lighting, center punching, iconographic eye lines, using all of those techniques that I would talk about in the book. And then I think it worked for this film just because, you know, the subject matter fitted so well. But I didn't go back. Max Gardner and Carter Connor have elements of it, but, you know, I performed the exercise.
Thank you.
And you earned your first Oscar nomination for it. How did you feel about that?
I don't know. You know, Scorsese was Marie. Scorsese is a friend. He's always been obsessed with the Oscars. I remember telling him years ago, I said, Marty, you know, if Oscars are your priority, you need new priorities. Because if you look at the history of what had won or been acclaimed, only a small fraction survived the real test of history. Usually they are the flavor of the year. And a lot of the films that have just been ignored by the Academy have lived on and become part of film history. And many films that have been rewarded by the Academy are just trivialized as part of film minutia. So to get that, I mean, obviously the studios love that, you know. They put it up on the trailer. This film may have been written by a writer who may have once been considered for it. That's the announcement, I think. only way they can get nomination Academy Award into the configuration. But that's about as much as it meant to me. Yeah.
Mr. Schrader, you make a distinction between the transcendental style being an aspect of style rather than content. However, having watched the film today for the umpteenth time, now with an audience, I'm struck by how much humor there's in it. And I'm wondering whether that's an aspect of style, of transcendental style that you had identified, or it's just a matter of this film having that.
It's a matter of working in the commercial cinema in America. You know, there's not a lot of jokes in Bresson. There is a certain amount of irony, but here you have to, the whole trick of, look, when you're playing with time, and that's what transcendental style is, playing with time. Let me give you an example. In film, someone exits a room. A good splice, proper splice, is just before the latch closes. Now you see a Bresson film when I first saw one. The door closes and Bresson goes 1, 2, 3. Then he drops the splice. And what's happening for those 3 seconds? Nothing. Time is happening. He is imposing time on you. He is violating your notion of how films work by stopping time. Now that's transcendental style, that's Bresson. What happens if he waits 6 seconds? What happens if he waits 10 seconds? You know, what if he goes into Bellatar and just sits there on the door? Now time is really happening. And so that's the gimmick that you're playing with. So you play with that gimmick of delayed time, sparsity, you know, but at the same time you have to be able to relieve it because you are in the commercial cinema and you need palate cleansers. So you need a little bit of a joke about the choir master and the organist and whatever. And you need a little thing with the kids and that. But you're just using these techniques to keep people from leaving.
You talked about structure and CSI episodes essentially. When you're writing scripts, what are you thinking about in terms of structure? Are you thinking of the Save the Cat is very popular, which has created the structure in Hollywood, and so are you thinking about the all is lost, refusal of the call moment, or are you just writing what you think is a great?
No, I mean, I'm very big on outlining, intentionally outlining.
Yeah.
In fact, if you go Google, you'll see some of the very detailed outlines for things like Raging Bull, Last Temptation, and other scripts. Because I believe that screenwriting is not really a form of writing at all. That it's a form of oral storytelling. And you have to actually tell the story. You tell it, outline it, tell it again, outline it again. And each time you tell it, it gets a little bit longer. You add some more things. Oh, I need some more comic relief. Oh, I need a little more action. If you can tell a story for 45 minutes and hold somebody in the coffee shop, in the bar, in the diner, whatever, and just hold them, and you can tell when you're holding them because you can see it right in their eyes and in their body language. You can see if you're losing them for 10 seconds, you can see it. Just like a stand-up comic telling, losing the audience. If you can hold them for 40 minutes, you have a screenplay. And so that's when I teach screenwriting, what I basically teach is the oral tradition.
We're gonna try to get to all the way in the back, that hand. You. Yes. Yes, you.
When you're writing your characters doing their diary entries, how do you determine what is too much emotional self-awareness for where your protagonist is?
Can you help me? I lost the audio.
So he's doing, when you're writing the journals,
Yeah.
how do you know when you go too far emotionally? How do you control that?
I love narration. I describe it as intravenous feeding. You know, the viewer's getting nourishment, but they can't taste it. To me, that's good narration. Bad narration is film noir. It's traditional, gives you the emotion, gives you all of, good narration is absolutely bland. Gives you nothing, but it drops the stinger in. So what is good narration? The car was running low on gas, so I decided to fill it up. Gas was $4.25. A week ago, it was $3.95. Got a call from my brother. Apparently, our mother is very sick. I wanted to get some cigarettes, but I wished I didn't smoke so much. That's narration. You know, nothing. Boom. Apparently our mother was very sick. The opening line of the L'Étranger by Camus. Mother died yesterday, or was it the day before? And so that's how you sort of do narration. So you talk about card playing. Here's how you count cards. Here's how the rules run,
Coming up, or your gardener.
Yeah, the garden. How do you garden? And it's nothing. It's filler. It's anesthesia. It lures the viewer into thinking that somehow they're in this world, and then all of a sudden, you stick something in it. And so that's what I like about narration, rather than that, she walked into my office at 4:30. She was wearing a short skirt, that kind of stuff.
So you have two strong women characters in this movie. Have you ever written a movie centered on a woman?
A what?
A woman.
I've directed them. I directed Kathy and directed Betty Hearst. And I wrote a female character. I decided to do this kind of thing with a female. Last year I wrote a script called Aero. It was about a nurse in Puerto Rico. And it was a film about sexual irresponsibility, female sexual irresponsibility. Mainly behavior that just causes trouble. And it was a crime thing, and there was a narrator like this, and she had caused a situation in the past. She had fled to Puerto Rico, and now the whole thing was starting over again, and she was causing it again. She couldn't stop herself. And I thought this was really good, because there was a lot of explicit sex in it, masturbation, and talk about it. And I'm an old male, and now I'm on my part of town. And there's a lot of good female directors out there now. It's not like 40 years ago, when there were only 2 or 3. And, I feel out of place here. I feel like I'm in Spike Lee's house telling them how to redecorate. And so I decided not to do it. And then I subsequently have now optioned it to Elizabeth Moss for her to star and direct.
Excellent, excellent. How much time do we have? Maybe a couple more questions? One? None? One. Okay, go ahead. You in the red t-shirt.
So each of these three films, at least it seems to me, involves some kind of magical or mystical episode
Each of these films involves a magical, mystical episode
involving a woman, a
involving
female,
a woman, a female.
female character. I'm just wondering if you could.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I ended up subscribing to the idea that they were a trilogy. Because they all have lonely men narrating in empty rooms. You know, you put a chair in the room and it's fully decorated. But in First Reformed, what you just saw, I had this nagging sense that this man is trying to touch base, make contact with the Holy. And he can't do it. But he's so close to it. It's all around him. And I think these two people, Ethan and Amanda, they're so close. Don't they realize how close they are? They're so close that they can reach over and just touch it. And I said, how can I express that? I said, well, have them levitate. All of a sudden, they will just rise up. And they will go. And that's how close they are to the other world. And that, I like that solution. So I used it again in Card Counter with a Christmas display that just becomes magical. And then I used it again in Master Gardener, where after a kind of perverse Mandingo sex scene, reverse Mandingo, the whole world comes alive florally. It just comes into bloom. And that's probably what ties the three films together is that sense that 3/4 of the way through, we're going to step outside the parameter of all this rigid aesthetic realism that you've set up. And I told Joe Edgerton, because in Master Garden, every student, every day, do not act, do not do anything. You're a rock. Don't move. The water will hit you. You'll go away. Don't say a thing. And then we came to do that scene where the world comes alive. And I said, Joel, you know, all the days I've been telling you not to do anything, this is why. Go for it. Do anything you want. And so, you know, that's when you let it out.
Something for you all to look forward to. Thank you, Mr. Schrader.